you're not going to feel wonderful every day at the gym. In terms of some days, you're going to feel probably pretty shit. But if you keep turning up, you keep getting it done, you're going to change it, you're going to move. And so give yourself credit for turning up.
Today, we have one of the most incredible and inspiring guests on the show, Dean Mumm. Dean is a former Australian rugby player where he played for New South Wales Waratah and Exeter Chiefs in England. Due to his talent and leadership qualities, he was given the captain's badge for Wallabies. Today, he has a successful career heading up the corporate sports division at Marsh in Sydney. In addition, he is the co-founder of BorneHMRI, an initiative focused on medical research and improving health outcomes, particularly in the area of premature birth. Probably the most important role he has is being a family man with two beautiful boys, Alfie and Rupert, and an amazing wife, Sarah. I'm excited to have him on the show. Welcome, Dean, to the D8 Training Podcast.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Thanks. I appreciate you coming on. What is one of your most memorable moments during your rugby career?
There's plenty. I know everyone always remembers their first test match. And for me, I came off the bench, and there's this moment when you get into a next level of competition where there's always this question about whether you're good enough to make it. And so for me, that was a really interesting moment. But all I remember was running around like a headless chook for about 10 minutes or so before, because I was a blood injury substitute, and then came back on before I went in there. And I was so exhausted thinking about it, and probably did nothing. The other really great memory for me was probably the day that I captained Australia, which obviously is a good thing in its own right, but it was also the day that I'd had my son only 3 days beforehand. Alfie was born in the middle of the Rugby World Cup in the UK. Sarah happened to be over there as well. And so within the space of 3 days, son was born. I got announced as the test captain and then went on to play. So that was a pretty special week for me. And actually, Alfie had sort of wet lungs when he came out. So I actually didn't get to hold him before I had to go back and play this game. And so that Sunday, we played in Birmingham. We had a win, and then I got driven down by my brother-in-law to London and got to hold my son. So it was pretty tough to beat that one. It was a good day.
Yeah, I can imagine winning and then holding your little one. Wow.
Yeah, good one.
And then you did quite well in the Rugby World Cup. You made it all the way to the finals.
Yeah, we did. We made it in the final. The other thing I was going to say, particularly if you've got any English people, we managed to kick the English out of our own Rugby World Cup. That was a good day as well. But there's plenty of great days. But no, we did make it to the final, and it's an interesting one. And I think about the Olympics is on, and it's so interesting in that mentality of this is the moment to perform. The World Cup final for us, we sort of a little bit came from nowhere. We hadn't been performing that well, and then we just went on a run and got to the final. And it begs to me in this concept of belief in sport and the power of belief. And our coach at that time, Michael Checker, was as good a coach I've ever had about building people behind a cause and driving belief. And despite New Zealand just being the overwhelming favourites and end up winning, we couldn't see a way to lose. Maybe that's why it hurt so much in the weeks after, but it's a great concept in sport or whatever pursuit you're taking.
What was it about the coach that he was able to instill that mindset and the belief in the players?
I remember a meeting we had, it was 100 days out from the Rugby World Cup final, and we sat down and we're in Queensland, and he talked us through our sort of principles, or how we wanted to be known and how we wanted to be seen by others. In the concept that sort of perception's reality a little bit, there was an acronym, and it was WNTABS, and we called it WinTabs, and it was never take a backward step. And it was always, and it came off the back of when you look at the national emblem of Australia, you've got a kangaroo and an emu facing towards. Neither animal has the capability to walk backwards. And so in that mentality, we were personifying the national emblem, but personifying how we wanted to be. And just mentality-wise, that was it. If you ever questioned what you needed to do, you would do it. And in order to build that belief, We also had a diary that 100 pages in there that he encouraged us to write every day how we lived up to that. So slowly, even though in day 1 of 100, we didn't quite believe where we could be, by day 60, by day 70, we were right into the mentality about how to live and how to breathe that as a theme. It was powerful.
Wow, that's amazing. And I've got my daughter's currently in competition season for gymnastics, and that's a great one for children to ask them, what do you want to be known for, and never take a step backwards, that win tab and progressing forwards. And what inspired you to become a professional rugby player?
Not a lot, really. When I was a kid, there wasn't professional athletes in rugby when I was a kid, so it wasn't even a dream that I could do. Obviously, the Wallabies are around as an entity in an organisation, but my old man was a Kiwi. I was born in New Zealand, and my grandfather was an All Black. So I actually really never wanted to be a Wallaby. I wanted to be an All Black. But I did. I lived in Australia, and just as it went through, to be fair, I just loved playing sport. I loved rugby. I loved spending time with my mates, and just happened to be okay at it. And as it progressed, the opportunity was there. And I think, people often talk about sacrifices along the way. They are there, but ultimately I just think it's a choice. And if you choose to perform or give yourself the best opportunity to perform, then those perceived sacrifices are just choices. They're actually not even that difficult to make. If your goal is to perform, then the choice to go out with your mates and have a skinful is not a choice you can make. If you keep reinforcing that mentality, for me, so that's how it happened. You do need a bit of luck with when injuries come and timing, but I was just fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time and maybe capitalise on the opportunities that were there in front of me.
And how did you keep going when there were challenges or there were tough times, and you could have maybe taken the easy option and gone to have a drink with your mates as opposed to continuing to train and keep pursuing it?
Yeah, it's a good question. If you look at someone that's had a career for anything sort of 10 years plus at an elite sport, there's huge credit to the power of just keeping and turning up, because that's it. It's a lot of fun, but throughout those stages, there will be an injury that's significant enough. I broke my ankle twice. I sort of did other things, had shoulder operations, and you just got to keep going. I was fortunate enough to have an ability to just keep moving through whatever it needed to be. It was just a lot of fun. There are periods where you're not performing well, and they are hard. It's hard to find it. So I think having the right support mechanism and the concept of being a good person as well as a good athlete is really a key facet. The best athletes that I have experienced or been with were pretty good people as well. And in my mind, that's not a coincidence. So if you're unstable off the field, you're unlikely to have moments where you're unstable on it. So that sort of calmness, that element, that the whole support mechanism, and probably a good analogy for life, allows you to perform at the best of your ability.
And they also do say you're the average of the top 5 people you hang around with as well. So being in that sporting environment, they would be there encouraging and helping, I assume, to keep going through those tough times.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's groups within groups as well. So you might be in a high performance environment, your team might be running pretty well, but there also is going to be a sub-segment of that group around that 5 people that can drive things even harder, or they're the people you want to be with because they're the people in the group that are like you, that are driven like you. And I think it's about identifying those people, but generally I think that what you put out there is what you get. So if you're delivering, if you're doing things for the group, you probably end up hanging out with those people anyway.
And how important do you think coaches and mentors are?
Yeah, they're incredibly important. There's a guy that I used to be a rugby player, but he does a lot of analytics now on the power of cohesion, and he would argue that team sports are based on cohesion is the number one element that leads to success. His company's called Gainline Analytics, and it's a really interesting mentality. I've seen enough coaches to think that the coach that manages people well is likely to put themselves in the best position for success. I think the same in business, or what I see now is those people that are leaders, not managers, and can lead people well, or can get people to think beyond themselves into achieving a grander goal, are just setting themselves up to success more than others. Now, I think that's really important. In terms of mentors, I think it's really, again, it goes back to what does your 5 people around you look like? And I think that concept of mentors is important. I think I had mentors on the way through that would give me advice, but often it was less so around the playing side of it, because your coach did that. It was more around the balance and how to balance life and the other elements. In fact, one of the best mentors that I had was talk to me about how to address concern about how I would move in my transition and move into business, because it was something that was occupying my mind. So, and that was just a powerful thing for me.
Different areas within your life, having different people to help guide you there and across it.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point that you raise, and the fact that it also doesn't need to be the one person for every area of your life. I was fortunate in Dad was a great mentor, but my brother was very good. I had Sarah and I were together for throughout my whole sporting career, and so it was nice and stable. But I think that concept of searching for the right person, the right area is probably a good thing, or not putting pressure on yourself that it has to be one person either.
I don't think one person is the right person. There might be someone that's really good and you've got a personal trainer for the gym, for strength training. Then you might have a physio or a chiropractor to help with the body. So you need different people in different teams so you can have that whole holistic life. Yeah,
absolutely. What you want is going to be different to the person next to you as well. And finally, I just think you're not going to find if you're not looking. It doesn't mean you have to find it. You've got to be looking for those people. When you say yes to opportunities, when you do different things, you ultimately will find what you're looking for.
We've got the kids junior gym program here at D8, and we have lots of kids that are aspiring to, play for Australia, become a professional athlete. What do you recommend for them in terms of mentors? Who should they be looking to?
I've met a few of my heroes in the time, and some have lived up to it, and some of them have disappointed me. Often the person that's slightly closer to home is the better mentor in that instance. I reckon the key to it all is just to have fun. And if you like turning up to training, if the setup is training means that you're getting better every day and you like doing it with the people around you, then you're much more likely to turn up and to want to get better. I actually think the best mentors for me were people that were probably 3 or 4 years sort of ahead of my progression, and that was certainly the people that I looked up to. So there was a guy in the same position as me when I entered the Waratahs, and he was setting the standard about how to play and the amount of work he would get through, but he wasn't insular about how to do it. He actually shared it, quite openly, and that had a profound effect on me. And then I would ask him questions on the way through. One of the elements of our role was to call the line out, which is sort of a strategic approach. He would talk me through how he breaks down a line out, how he would build his strategy, how he'd understand. And so that sort of mentoring from that person that's just above you. In the event of the young gymnasts in your realm or people training, how to deal with competition, how to approach it, how to deal with things that are outside of my control. Do I need to worry about those things outside of my control? How does someone else do it? And just being open to that and asking positive questions is probably a pretty good start.
I loved how you referenced about someone maybe that's a few steps ahead of you, because you've got your Ronaldos and Messis, which are big now, Michael Jordans, Kobe Bryant's there, whereas going that 1 or 2 steps ahead, that's a lot more of an achievable goal. And then they've got the steps just by talking to them, asking them to be able to get there and then continue moving up. When you compare yourself to some of the elites and you're not there yet, it might seem too far of a distance.
Absolutely. There's only one Simone Biles. There's only one Emma McKeon, but there's a handful of people just in front of you that might be even more valuable.
Yeah, definitely. During your time as an athlete, how important was strength training throughout your journey?
I think it was always important. It's whether or not I always recognised it was important was probably the second element. But I was a skinny kid Generally, for my whole career, I needed to put weight on. And so I spent the 12 years of my playing career in the bulking club. I played at about 110 kilos. I probably entered my professional life at sort of 105, something like that. The only way to get that is strength training. So it was always really important. What I probably didn't realize was the importance of strength training in terms of the maintenance required over the period of time. So we used to do bulks of training at the start of the year in pre-season training. We used to lift 4, sometimes 5 times a week. Hypertrophy stage throughout that was really significant. The older I got, the more I understood the role of the training throughout the competition period to sort of maintain your capability. Also, I think there's a fair bit of confidence that's attached with that, because it's kind of like there's an element of being good or trying to achieve in all the elements of your training makeup. So strength was one of ours, but obviously there was on field, there was speed, there was agility, there was technical skill, and that constant attempt to achieve across all of that was really important. Often you would go in and we would do like a power session on a Thursday, and if you felt really good, you were very confident leading into the competition. So yeah, there was obviously the physical side of it, which as I developed was really important. But there's the mental side of it as well, in terms of this is an important part of my training makeup as an athlete. I need to continue to try and get incremental gains in this if I'm going to get incremental gains on the field as well.
You mentioned maintenance training throughout the season. What was maintenance training?
For me, that was moving from 4 to 5 sessions in pre-season to 2 to 3. 3 was the ability to really 2 was enough, but not enough to sort of get any gains throughout the season, but I needed to go up to 3. Often that would be probably a lower body session, probably a whole body session, and then a power session in there as well. Now power, we used to do a lot of Olympic lifting in there, predominantly, sort of cleans or hang cleans. And sometimes we'd, progress to sort of hang snatch or something like that as well. But at the tail end of the week, it'd be about sharpening that tool for the weekend. And so you would lighten the weight and just try and focus on the speed component, not the actual weight that you were lifting.
You did mention a few times you're the skinny kid and you came in at 105 and then we're 110. How big are rugby players? Because I would have thought over 100 kilos was a good size.
So I played in second row, so sort of number 4 or 5 in rugby, often back row. People can comfortably be at 120, even 125 in that position. One of the guys I was packing down with throughout my stage was 145. So wow. They're big people. So I was probably on any one day giving up sort of 5 to 10 kilos to my opposition. It's a relative concept, skinny, isn't it? Yeah. So, because at 110, that's the deemed to be. But it was more, I think, what I meant from there is, I'm fortunate in a way to have a relatively efficient metabolism, and I think genetic lottery, to be fair. And so the maintenance of weight was really important for me as well, because it wouldn't be uncommon on a hot day for me to lose 3 or 4 kilos in a match, just water weight. I might start in late January at the end of pre-season at 112, but by the back end of the season, I might be 109.
Do you still do strength training now?
I do, yeah. I would do strength training 3 to 4 times a week. It's interesting. I was speaking to a friend the other day who used to play professional rugby as well, and he goes, the last thing I wanted to do when I finished playing rugby was go back in the gym. You're sort of maxed out at the gym and you need a rest. And a bit the same for me. I wanted to change it up because I've been doing it for such a long time. So actually, I'm sort of 7 years post-rugby now. I probably spent 2 or 3 years not doing much in the gym and doing other things for fitness. And moving from sort of a interval athlete, rugby generally operates on intervals of sort of 40 seconds effort up to a minute and a half, and then there's a break. And so you naturally have to be an interval athlete. But I spent a while trying to be an endurance athlete. But then I came back to the weights because I'm a big believer in the fact that strength's a central part in maintaining your metabolism. The little things like grip strength and proprioception, particularly as you get older and the increased atrophy increases, that they're really important things. So actually, I 3 to 4 times a week now, but I do sort of more functional strength rather than hypertrophy stuff.
They do say that grip strength is a sign of longevity as well in life. Like the stronger your grip strength, the longer you'll be able to live. And there's studies apparently that show that now. How has your strength training changed from your rugby days to now?
I used to be very hypertrophy focused, certainly for certain stages, hypertrophy and power.
What's hypertrophy?
Hypertrophy, so as in trying to add muscle mass on. That's sort of specifically training, generally like just volume training to try and get muscle mass on you. And again, because I was in the growth club or the get big club, that was sort of what I did a lot. It was obviously very important for me to have a lot of upper body weight on as well, because a lot of your contact happened up top. Now it's much more about strength for range and sort of through a full range of movement. Like I was in the gym this morning, but I don't think I touched a formal weight, a dumbbell or a kettlebell. I had the rings, I was doing some hanging work, some ab work, those sort of things. Also now just don't really do bench or any traditional lifting, but a lot more hamstring rear chain work, because I think functionally it's good for me. If I sit down all day, those things don't get fired very often. So it's nice to get that done in the morning.
And I personally find, especially with hamstrings, if I don't stretch them or work them out for a couple of weeks working an office job as well, I can feel the difference and I become all tight. And now, especially during winter. Do you recommend kids do strength training?
I do. I think there's a balance. I think the type of strength training is really important. I'm not a biomechanist or anything, but I think, at some stage I went from not that tall to being pretty tall, and it does put a huge stress on your body. So I think squats or deadlifts with poor technique can present challenges to kids that are growing. I think now there's a really effective way to do those sort of movements without necessarily loading them a lot. You could do a single leg RDL with no weight that might be better for you than using a barbell. Body weight training, it can be so effective if done well, and body weight training through a full range of movement even more so. And so kids can be super powerful. They're already resilient, but the challenge is maintaining your flexibility. I think body weight training and flexibility would be a really interesting element.
Definitely. And I do like the full range of movement. I think no matter how old you are, making sure you're training all areas of your body, not just specific ones. And that's where it's been seen with some of the injuries. Like kids might be training soccer 5 times a week plus playing 2 games. It's always the same muscle. So making sure that they get other movements in so that they are less likely to injure themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
What was the best piece of advice that your parents gave you growing up?
Good question. I don't recall a specific piece of advice, really. I was giggling the other day because my son was reading like spy novels and things like that. And I was giggling to him and saying that my dad used to read Michael Johnson, as in the 400-meter athlete, used to read his autobiography to me. So maybe there was an inherent training going on there that I didn't know about. But I think what was the better message for me was that my old man was a frequent trainer, and he took his fitness and health really seriously. And so it was more the picture of what I was seeing. He was really powerful, and he would get himself up every morning, take himself into the gym, do the workout. For now, looking back on it, was a real part of his mental health piece as well. It was his release from otherwise pretty stressful jobs, etc. I think rather than a specific piece of advice was the fact that they were actively engaged in fitness activities, but they were also actively engaged in my development, and my old man and coached, and mum was in the canteen, and so I saw them always contributing.
As they say, kids don't do as you say, they do as you do. Sometimes I find I need to be careful with what I say or do because it might end up back at school.
That's right. No, I think that's right. Particularly aware when your kid might come out with a swear word and they used it in the perfect context. They've only probably learned that from one area.
And it's interesting, we've had a few athletes on the show, and the key thing seems to be for parents to be there actively present for the kids as they grow up, going to their games, driving them, taking it, and being their number one supporter throughout it.
Yeah, absolutely.
How can parents support kids with big dreams while also preparing them for the possibility that they might not make it? So you might not want to say to them, hey, only 1% of people make it to be professional athletes.
There's two things that come to mind on that. I heard a podcast the other day and had Billy Slater, who's the former rugby league great and now coach of the Queensland Maroons State of Origin team. And it was talking around feedback as a mechanism. And he had a go at one of his assistant coaches for providing negative feedback. And his comment was, have you provided positive feedback before that? Now, he wasn't talking about like a feedback sandwich where you go good, bad, good. He was talking about the fact that it needs to be in balance, and feedback needs to be open conversational topic, not just only there when it's bad. And I think it's really difficult as a parent. You want to get on the bad things because you can see where it might steer off course, but you've got to praise the good as well. You've got to praise the effort. Ultimately, I think the effort is better than the outcome, and that sort of leans into my second point. It would be definitely have that. You've got to be praising the good. You've got to be praising the turning up and getting it done. You've got to praise the turning up and getting it done, even when they didn't want to go. And then that probably gives you the right to then talk about things when they probably need to be pulled back onto course. And the second one is, and again, having been exposed to lots of athletes in my time and in high performance, but geez, the effort's so important. The effort to turn up, the effort to be better every day, they're the things, and embedding those habits that will lead to just the achievement to your potential. And that's all really you can do. But I'd imagine those habits actually increase the range of your potential in time as well. So once you're on that positive trend and your habits are good and you're getting reinforcement for effort, that just turns this flywheel, and that your potential starts to go from a little range into a really big range. And so, yeah, they're the two things that I think would be important.
I do like that, because we do tend to provide the creative criticism because we want to help our kids. We want them to improve. Whereas that effort, the fact that they actually turned up when they didn't want to, even though they might have trained only 60%, they were there, they did it. And they're still kids at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely they are. That's the hardest thing about going to the gym often, is getting to the front door. And if it's the hardest thing for us, why is it any different for kids? And it's maybe even harder for them, but they can't articulate it maybe as well. So, it wasn't a great session, but we turned up and we got it done. Good on you. Well done for that. Awesome effort. Maybe that's all it needs to be.
Well, turning up, especially as an adult, I know the hardest part for me sometimes is getting through that door. Once I'm there, I do it and my body's grateful for it. Now, let's move to challenges. I know you've had a major challenge in your life. When I first heard about it, it was just completely unthinkable. Your story is incredibly inspiring, and I really commend you and your wife, Sarah, having the courage and the resilience through it. Could you share the story and how you overcame that challenge?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you mentioned we've got two boys, Alfie and Rupi, but we've actually got six children. So Sophie, Henry, Ella and Grace aren't here simply because they were born too soon. So they're all born preterm. Each one of those instances, now there was 3 pregnancy losses for us there. So Sophie was first, and she was born at 21 weeks, and then Henry came after, and he was born at 28 weeks for a totally different reason. But he survived the birth and then died 9 days later. He got an infection, so that was pretty tough. And then we had Alfie, and then we lost twins, Ella and Grace, for another different reason at 20 weeks. And then Rupert came last. And so, yeah, it was bloody hard, that. Can't shortcut that in any sense. But that repeated loss was really difficult. The staying on course and turning back up was somewhat easier because no one ever said no to us. Certainly, which was hard, and particularly hard for Sarah, was the anxiety about what could go wrong. Once people talk about the risk factor of certain situations, and often in all of our instances, we'd be in the 1% chance of it happening, and it would be us, and it happened over and over again. And so actually that fear and anxiety, and I think anyone that's been through a pregnancy loss will know that the second time round is incredibly hard, and to keep going. And so, yeah, it wasn't an easy time for us at all, to be fair.
As a parent, I couldn't imagine what you would have gone through, like having to lose not one child, with 4. It would have been tough. What kept you going?
I might have been belligerence in the end, to be fair. No one ever said no. No one ever said not to continue. And then if we wanted a family, which we desperately did, there was obviously other ways, but we just kept going. And I don't know any other way to say it, really, than in the absence of no, it was yes, and that was it.
Okay. And now you've got the 2 beautiful boys, Alfie and Rupert.
That's right. And it's funny, hey, obviously it's been a big part of our life, and obviously really questioned those sort of things, or any trauma really. I sort of changed my view on it all, because no one misses out in trauma in their life. It really is part of what we do. The only thing is you don't know what it will be and when it's coming, but it's coming at some stage. And it's actually how you bounce through that becomes there, or how it shakes your identity, and it will shake your identity if it's bad enough as well. And so I think that has been a really interesting thing for us looking back, is our sort of scope of hurt has developed. It has moved from when you're unaware of what can happen, you sit in this almost with your blinkers on, and then the sort of scope of the human condition in a way is far broader for us, and we sort of understand that as well. But as a result, we're also incredibly grateful for what we've got. We're incredibly grateful to have Alfie and Rupert, and every night we go in and, when they're asleep, and just give them a kiss, because we're not taking that for granted. We know that we're really fortunate. We know there's a chance we may not have had that as well. Trauma doesn't only have to be negative. It can be really positive as well, and your life can actually improve as a result. And I think we're in a position now where we've done lots of things as a result of the loss that we've had that actually really form who we are moving forward. I'm incredibly honoured to have met, Sophie, Henry, Ella and Grace. It wasn't for long, but those couple of minutes there, but it's incredible to note the power that can have on your entire life. And it was a real pleasure to meet them all.
It's amazing how you handle it. Just the thought of it's just made me emotional as well. But I love also what you and Sarah have done is turn this personal tragedy, this trauma, into a force for good, which you've done with BorneHMRI Foundation, and how you're using your experience to help others. Can you tell us a bit more about the foundation and its mission?
Yeah, our mission's pretty simple, and we want to prevent preterm birth. We don't want families to go through what we've been through, to be fair. Along the way, we also recognise that there's some pretty amazing Aussie talent out there. So we want to back Australian talent to solve a global problem. Now, 15 million babies are born preterm birth every year. 1 million of those will die, and it remains the leading cause of death and disability in children under 5. In Australia, there's 26,000 babies born preterm. That's 70 a day, and 9,000 of those will pass away. So this is not an uncommon problem. That's 27,000 families in Australia that will deal with this every year. And we think there can be a better way. And sort of once we started to have a look, we realised that there really hadn't been any significant developments in treatment for 50 years. And we weren't really comfortable with that as a situation. The same way that research into cancer, things like leukemia, that have totally revolutionised the survival rates for particularly children, research into Parkinson's and all these things, they've changed the way. So we wanted to go to research because we believe that's the biggest multiplier effect if we can get it right.
And how can people hear more about the charity and donate to it, and so they can help the cause?
Yeah, I mean, if you just Google BorneHMRI, so Borne is BORNE, HMRI. HMRI stands for Hunter Medical Research Institute. So that's just off the back of John Hunter Hospital there in Newcastle. sort of as the gateway to health in Newcastle and the New England area of New South Wales. And there's just the most incredible researchers there that we have got to know. One of the guys that leads the mothers and babies division there is a distinguished laureate professor called Roger Smith, who's just got the most brilliant mind for grand visions on how to change things. And they're doing some really, really fascinating stuff. And so for us, I think we see, just in terms of a little bit more about the charity, but in terms of our role, we think that research funding, particularly philanthropic research funding, so one that's funded by individuals, allows these brilliant people to take on ideas that are brand new and have never been tested before. You know, you don't get the big government grants for research until you've proven your test case. So it's almost like seed funding for business, because you back someone and you back a good idea, and that's kind of what we're able to do. So that's been really exciting, and we've seen some really cool stuff. So yeah, if you Google BorneHMRI, or Instagram is a way, or LinkedIn, there's sort of pages there that people can have a look at what we're doing.
And I'll leave all the details in the show notes of the BorneHMRI Foundation, and then you can go directly to there, click on it, and then donate through there. It's such a wonderful cause. So if you can, please do donate, because we don't want any parents to have to endure what Sarah and Dean did. Thank you on that, Dean, and thank you so much for coming on. I have two final questions before we close. What is one habit that someone can start today to make a positive impact on their training or vitality?
It probably leads into what I was thinking before, and the advice you give your kids. Why not be the same for you? I'd praise the effort, self-praise the effort. You're not going to feel wonderful every day at the gym. In terms of some days, you're going to feel probably pretty shit. But if you keep turning up, you keep getting it done, you're going to change it, you're going to move. And so give yourself credit for turning up. I think it's a really important habit.
I think that's a great piece of advice, and something I've never thought of as well, because just by doing something, it will have an impact. So thank you. And lastly, what does dominate mean to you?
Dominate to me means like completely overwhelm the opponent, so without doubt who the winner was. I think of any instance where you were fortunate enough to be, or I was fortunate enough to be a team that dominated an opposition. It was just without doubt who was the best team on that day. Now, I think you can interchange opponent to whatever it is. Your opponent can be the alarm clock. It can be the walk to the gym. It can be food. It can be, I hate doing chin-ups like I do because I've got long arms and I'm shit at them. If you dominate that, then no one's in doubt as to who the winner was.
Like that. Thank you again, Dean, for joining us on the show. You're absolutely remarkable and inspirational. Everything you shared, I've got notes that I've written down, so many, and looking forward to listening to this again. I love what you shared about the Wallabies coach when you were captain, about the win tab, and to be knowing what you want to stand for, and the advice you had for the kids. So thank you. If you're ever in Adelaide, please let me know, reach out, and I'd love to catch up with you in person. To everyone else, thank you for listening. Again, I'll put all the details in the show notes of the BorneHMRI Foundation. So please, if you can, do contribute. And also please share and subscribe to the show. Dean's advice, I know, will help so many aspiring and current athletes, as well as for future and current parents navigating turbulent times. Until next time, dominate your life.